Hi, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our Justice and Pieces guest speaker series. And today, really happy to have as a guest for us. She's recently the recipient of the 2021 Lincoln Alexander Award from the Law Society, one of 10 citizenship judges here in Canada, professor of paralegal studies at Mohawk College, as well as a licensed paralegal and immigration consultant, and all sorts of other things that she's going to share with us today, especially about volunteering in your community as well. So thank you so much, Rochelle, for joining us here. Really happy to have you.
Thanks so much for having me, JP. I'm happy to be here.
Now, there's so many things that I just touched on. So perhaps maybe you can give us a little bit of your background. I know one of the things I didn't mention for all my trial students that are listening, that some moons ago, she was not in your actual chairs because we're virtual these days, but as a graduate of the Trios College program from 2011, I think, and from the Hamilton campus. So once again, thanks again. And please let us know a little bit more about you.
Sure, absolutely. So yes, I came to Trios in 2010, actually graduated in 2011. And what brought me there was so I have a degree in criminology. I have a postgrad in dispute resolution, and my family and I relocated to Niagara from the GTA. And at the time, I did a spousal relocation. My husband had found a new opportunity in the Niagara region, and I was looking for work and couldn't find anything. I was, the government was supposed to be finding me work, and everything was just not working out for me. But the level that I was at in the government in the Niagara region is management, and it just wasn't coming together for me. And we were in the midst of a recession. And so at that time, we decided, you know what, the work that I can do and the work that I was doing at the time required a license. You needed, at that time now, we were getting into regulation. And so I needed a license in order to continue the work that I was doing. And so I needed to get to go and get my paralegal diploma and then get regulated through the Law Society. Niagara didn't have a program, and the nearest one was in Hamilton, and the only show in town at the time was Trios. And so off I went every single day, much like these Trios students, driving the hour drive to Hamilton in order for me to get my education and meet the requirements in order for me to get my paralegal diploma. And so that was in 2010, and I graduated in 2011. I was licensed, and at that time, again, trying to find opportunities within various law firms, and smatterings here and there, but nothing that could contribute to my household in a very meaningful way. At the time, we had 3 children. And so I started my own practice. I was a sole practitioner, and I spent a lot of time, much like I'm sure your trial students now, going to court and observing court and learning through osmosis, and, seeking out mentors and trying to find as much information as I can. Now, I had a legal background prior to even being at Trios. I worked for the federal courts and the Immigration Refugee Board. I was also a mediator. I was registered with the ADR Institute of Ontario, and I was a roster mediator in Toronto. So I had done a lot within the legal field. But even still, it's different when you now have to venture out on your own. And so I actually took a job with the ministry as oh goodness, I'm trying to remember what they're called, but I was literally the person that says, all rise, right? I was that person who would be, going into court and sitting in the courtrooms just so I could learn. There was, humility is going to be your best teacher. It didn't matter that I had all my degrees. It didn't matter whatever I had. I wanted to learn, and so I took a job that would allow me to be behind the scenes, sitting in pretrial conferences and sitting in as many things as I could, so that I could learn the ropes. And then I opened my own practice, and I did that for a number of years. until I was actually contacted by someone that I went to Trios with. And he had asked if I would be available to teach a few classes at CDI while I was running my practice. And I said, sure. And so I taught at CDI College. And then I got a call from Mohawk asking if I would write the curriculum for tribunal practice and procedure. Now, in that time frame, I had been publicly appointed to the Council of the College of Midwives of Ontario, and I had been doing disciplinary hearings for the Council of the College of Midwives of Ontario and sitting on investigations and complaints hearings and doing all of that. And also just honing my craft and, representing people before the Human Rights Tribunal and the Landlord Tenant Board. And so I hope that it made sense that I was asked to do that. And so I wrote the curriculum and moved on to teach the course. And so I was a partial load instructor actually at Mohawk and at CDI for a little bit until I became a full-time professor at Mohawk College. And that really just continued for me. I guess I just continued to do what I was doing. I forgot in that time frame, I also decided that I would additionally seek out further my education and get my immigration certification and become a regulated immigration consultant. And so I also pursued that while I had my fourth child. I literally was breastfeeding and studying and wrote that license. And so I, in addition to teaching part-time, I was also, taking on clients and doing the whole shebang as a sole practitioner. Up until I became a citizenship judge, I continued to take on clients and continued to hone my craft. I co-authored Tribunal Practice and Procedure for Legal Professionals. I wrote 6 of the, I want to say there's 15 chapters, something like that. I wrote many of the chapters in that textbook, and just continuing to learn and grow. You never stop learning and growing. And so that's what I have been doing over the last, how many years? So. Mm-hmm.
Well, there's so much in there from the teaching, from the writing, as well as the mediation and the immigration and paralegal practice. And but from all of that you mentioned there, you become one of the 10 citizenship judges, and maybe we can sort of talk a little bit more about this, because I mean, first of all, there's only 10 of you, so it's rare in of itself, but kind of what that entails. And I suppose that at least with maybe anything immigration related, that you can't practice in there anymore. And so perhaps maybe you can tell us a little bit about what a citizenship judge does and the kinds of matters that can find themselves before you. And as well as, I mean, right now with things being virtually, how has that affected how citizenship matters get before you, if they are in fact going ahead right now?
Absolutely. So when I saw, in tribunals, I teach my students about the public appointments process and how that works, and how people in various capacities, whether it's municipally, provincially, and nationally, how federally, how we can participate. And I am a strong proponent of civic engagement. And so this is one way that you can become civically engaged. And I saw the posting for citizenship judges, and I applied, much like I'm sure thousands of people that applied. But I felt that my experiences in a regulatory context, both regulatory as a paralegal, right? But also in a regulatory context with the College of Midwives. And I also sat on the DARC committee, which is a discipline appeal review committee for the Immigration Consultants Regulatory Council, doing appeal and reviews. So I thought that experience and that decision writing capability would really help, but also my immigration background and just my strong interest. I'm a case law junkie. I like to read case law. So I applied, much like many other people. It was a very lengthy process. It was a year and a half of assessments, various ways that they assess your capabilities, from decision writing to oration skills and what have you. And then a lengthy interview, and then they check your references, and then they do a very in-depth Privy Council background search. And so then I was successful to be one of 10 across Canada appointed as a citizenship judge. Now, what I like about it is that it was a part-time appointment, meaning I applied for part-time. I didn't apply for it to be a full-time position because I wanted to continue teaching, and I love that flexibility to be able to continue teaching and to continue to contribute in that way to the profession. And so it's a part-time appointment, and Mohawk was very supportive of my application, and they actually, you know, while I teach, they will give me days where I can also do the work that I need to do as a citizenship judge. So it's been a very wonderful relationship, and I love that I get that level of support. Now, in terms of what citizenship judges do, it's a threefold job. The one that most people are familiar with are citizenship ceremonies. And so I do preside over citizenship ceremonies, and I confer citizenship on individuals currently across Canada, because we're in a virtual context. I'll talk more about that in a little bit, but normally they would just be in Ontario. When I was first appointed, I was appointed to Mississauga, but as we kind of rejigged things, in 2019, I was appointed to Niagara Hamilton. Now, even though I am the judge appointed to Niagara Hamilton, I still do ceremonies in Mississauga, Kitchener. We travel to London, Windsor. Sometimes I'll go to Port Hope, Scarborough. We still travel all over the province. There are 4 judges in Ontario because it's the busiest province. We 2 in Scarborough, 1 in Mississauga, and then I do Niagara Hamilton, but we all work together to cover all of Ontario. So that's one component of the job. The other component is that we do hearings. And so, yes, whether someone has a shortfall, meaning they haven't met the criteria in terms of 1,095 days, or there are credibility issues or criminality, things like that, matters can come before us, whether for hearing or what we call paper review. So we review the file and make determinations. And so that is also a very large component of our job. And then the third component of our job is outreach, which I love. So we also go out into the community and talk to people about citizenship, the requirements of citizenship, and also civic engagement. And so it depends on the audience. If we're talking to Canadians, we do reaffirmation ceremonies, or we might be talking about our robust system and what are the requirements of citizenship and how we can foster a sense of belonging, how we can foster inclusion and ensuring that everyone feels a sense of belonging in our communities. If we're talking to newcomer groups, we talk about the requirements of citizenship, and we talk about what might be required, and keeping in mind, these are the things that will be required in your journey. If we're talking to schools, we're, in grade 6, for instance, they're talking about civics. And so we have these robust, wonderful conversations about civics. But in addition to that, I go and talk to the Girl Guides about citizenship. So I could be talking to anyone. And actually recently I did a keynote for the Niagara District Council of Women. And I, synthesize the work that they do and how that partners with the work that I do, and how civic engagement and the work that the Niagara District Council of Women really is a wonderful partnership, and how we have a duty to advocate for disadvantaged and historically marginalized groups. That includes immigrants, but that also includes racialized individuals. That also includes people who are differently abled, and that also includes, various historically disadvantaged groups. And so that's part of my message, and that's part of what I also do as well. So it kind of, for me personally, kind of feeds into all the things that I love to do and that I have the skill set to do. And then the final component of what you asked in terms of how COVID has kind of affected what we've done. So when so prior to COVID, all of our ceremonies were in person. In fact, we were swearing in 4,500 new citizens every single week across Canada. And then on March 13th, that all came to a halt. And we didn't have an alternative. That's just how we did things. But by mid-April, we were doing some emergency virtuals. And by June 1st, we were up and running. We were doing ceremonies. And I do ceremonies every single week. This is actually, I sat here so you could see my virtual background. So this is where I sit and do virtual ceremonies from the comfort of my home every single week, swearing in new Canadians. And I do them over Zoom. They're given an invitation and we do the ceremonies. The staff work extremely diligently every single week to coordinate all of the ceremonies. We do our speeches. We still do all of the pomp and circumstance to the best of our abilities, right from the comfort of our homes. And so it's been a wonderful, still very emotional, still very meaningful process. And it's been really beautiful to see that we've been able to pivot and do that. And our hearings were already virtual, much like some other tribunals. So we already had video conferencing. We had to really think about how to do things a little bit differently because we were still relying on some in-person components. But now we're back to doing hearings as well. So we got it.
Thanks for sharing all that. And I think, and since you mentioned about the tribunals and things being done kind of virtual now, and my students just had to do like a virtual mock hearing in class last week. So maybe you can give us some tips from the bench there of how to kind of approach it now that we're doing things, and certainly in some tribunals have been always doing things virtually. It's a little bit different than being in person and being able to deliver, but what have you seen that's kind of been very effective in terms of oral or written advocacy? And I think sometimes there's a combination, right? If closing submissions can be done in writing, that you can share to my students.
Well, so what's been interesting for me is I was always one of those people as an advocate who was like, as much as you can, you ask for that in person because you require that, that in-person ability to be able to convey and advocate for your client. We're currently in an environment where that isn't possible. And so the most important thing that you as an advocate, the most important thing that you have to do is to be able to provide advocacy in the most clear and concise way possible. You really do have to be thinking about so just like how you would be thinking about the way that you look and the way that you are going to present yourself when you would be doing things in person is the same way that you need to be thinking about the way that you look and the way that you're presenting yourself in a virtual setting. And so we do have to be concerned about sound. We do have to be concerned about the quality of the sound that we're providing. We do need to be concerned about the quality of the submissions that we're providing. And I think that we actually have to be more in tuned and more focused than when we're in person. And so this is not a time for complacency. You are actually being judged more in this virtual setting because there's more of a capacity for the individual to be distracted by the things that are around you, by the things that are behind you. And so you really have to be mindful. You really have to be, you have to take a moment. And so I do that. Even as, when I'm speaking, I am mindful about what books do I have behind me. So this is my virtual citizenship background. But if I'm doing a keynote or if I'm speaking, I am mindful about what I have behind me. I'm mindful about the books that I might have on the shelf. I'm mindful about my sound. I will make the time to do the tests necessary to make sure that my sound is very clear. I will make sure that I have taken the time to rehearse what it is that I'm saying. I will make sure that that I have everything that I need right at my disposal, because this is the time where professionalism is going to count more than anything else. Because in this virtual setting, you are being judged more than anything else. People are now experiencing Zoom fatigue. Zoom fatigue has set in. And so now more than ever, you've got to be very diligent. So more than anything, that's what I would say. You know, what you are going to be conveying to a decision maker. So everyone is required to be impartial. Everyone is required to listen to what you're saying. So, you know, don't think that they're not. It's just the reality is that we're all human beings. And the reality is that those distractions, all of those things, the quality of your sound, everyone is just tired, and everyone it would really help. You know, I can even think about in citizenship ceremonies, even, you know, you even see my staff will be like, that person's they decorated their background, and what, you know, you start thinking more highly of someone simply because they've put in a certain amount of effort. And not to say that, and so please, we're not misconstruing that anyone thinks that one citizen's better than another. I'm just saying that people are making note of certain things. People are noticing certain things. And so I'm saying, as practitioners, make note of the fact that now that we are in an environment that everyone is kind of tired of being online, the little efforts that you make, the effort to look nice, the effort to try to kind of create a background that's not busy, the effort to ensure that everything that you need is right at your disposal and you're not going to disappear. You know, the effort that you make to be clear and concise and to look directly into the camera, all of those things will have an impact on the impression that is made.
Thanks for those tips there. And I think as well for my students, and certainly the students that you have as well, it's certainly been challenging in a remote environment. You're mentioning Zoom fatigue and you know, the temptation that you can be lying in bed listening to a lecture. You can maybe turn your camera off, and you know, it creates its own challenges. I always wonder, like, if someone got the understanding of something, because you don't get that feedback you do in the classroom, or if, you know, your joke went over really well,
right,
or who knows, exactly. Right? But what
right.
have you found from your students, and maybe even in yourself in teaching in a remote environment? What challenges and what ways to kind of be mindful of those challenges that students have that you found have really worked for them in grasping the material, or just being able to engage with the rest of their class?
It's been hard. It's been hard on all of us. And so the lesson for me has just been grace. I'll be honest. I show my students grace, and I would hope that they show me grace as well. I acknowledge that this is hard. This is hard for all of us. You know, as I sit here, I wish I could show you guys my kids' homework area, and where they take their classes is directly in front of me. And so I have learned from even watching my children. And actually, I'll be honest. And so I'm very honest as well with my students, like, not too much. Like, I don't tell them all my business, right? But, but you know, the reason I even came home to do ceremonies, I was actually going to the office because I could. The Niagara Falls office was still open. We were wearing masks, very serious protocols. And the judge's office is isolated. And so I was able to go in, and I found that it was increasing my own productivity, because for me to be home meant I could do the laundry, and everybody was asking me what was for lunch. And I just felt like nothing was getting done, right? You know, and you know, if I was in a ceremony, you know, somebody would sneeze in the background, and I'd be like, oh, you know, so I would just go to the office. But my 7-year-old, I've got my kids range in age from 7 to 21. And my 7-year-old, he was the first one to just tap out. He was done with school. he had enough. And so, you know, I make the joke, like, I saw my 7-year-old like skipping school in front of me, but literally he was just done. And it made me think about my own students and how, you know, to have to just all of a sudden everything's online, not having the human connection, to have to do a lot of what I'm having to do along with being in school, not having childcare, not having whatever it is that they might need, that your routine is totally thrown off. And then all of a sudden, you're also now expected to do all this stuff. And so I kind of took that into account when I would be determining, you know, due dates, when I'd be determining even assignments, like things like that. Like, it's really just showing each other grace during all of this. And I don't even think it's just in terms of school, it's also in terms of just the way that we need to be interacting with each other during this environment. I mean, I personally think that's how we should be interacting with each other generally, but especially during this environment. And so even in ceremonies, like I've had situations where we take pictures. And so, you know, afterward, you know, each of the citizens can take a picture with us afterward. And there's people who can't take a picture. And I'm like, you know what? I'll take the picture, you know, like just something as simple as that. And so people just think that's so weird. The judge is taking my picture to send to email to me, but it's just, I'll just do that because right now you're totally nervous. You can't figure out how to take the picture. You know, let's just do that for you. And then I'm making the effort to try to get this amazing picture without my phone being in the, you know, like like that's just what we have to show each other right now. Apart from all of the other things that we could be doing, it's just showing each other grace. That in this environment, we're going to have some bad days. We're going to have days where, you know, we're really kind of overwhelmed. There's days where even I've had ceremonies and I've had to say to my staff, like, today is just not a day where the pictures are going to look good. Like, it's not a day where I feel like I can smile today. You know, I've had a death in the family. I've had people who have passed away because of this pandemic. And so I've had to say to my colleagues, you know, I can't smile today. And so I don't know if we're going to do pictures today. That's just what we've got to do in the midst of all of this with each other. So
Now, as well, I think this week is Mental Health Week, and I think maybe a good segue into whether it's Zoom fatigue, whether it's balancing working from home with taking care of your kids, whether it's dealing with deaths that are related to COVID-19. I mean, there's so much that's going on top of the usual stressors that we would normally otherwise have. Perhaps maybe you could share anything maybe that you would share with your students or with friends, family, whatever, in terms of how to better deal with everything that we're going on here and taking care of our mental health, because I find, at least even personally, a lot of the time that we would be spending commuting, we filled it with more work, or we filled it with taking on more responsibilities in a lot of cases. But at the same time, we got to take care of our own mental health and wellness. And being cooped up at home, I mean, you're not even allowed to go and play like tennis or something like that right now, or any outdoor sports, I think. So how do you kind of take care of all of those things? Any advice that you have for my students or anyone listening?
You know, self-care looks different to everyone. And so what I do for self-care is not going to be what you do for self-care, John Paul. Like, it's just that simple. I know what I do. Like, I go for walks, but I live in Niagara on the Lake. Right? So when I go for a walk, it's actually relaxing. Somebody else might go for a walk where they live and it's depressing, or it's not very relaxing to them, right? But when I go for a walk and nobody can go with me, like you know, there was one time the kids were like, "We're going for a walk," and I said, "No, we're not going for anything. I'm going for a walk because I need a break." So I go for walks. I find that when my stress levels rise, that I just take a moment to go for a walk. And sometimes that's between things. Like, I've figured out routes in my area where it's just a 20-minute walk or it's a half hour. I figured out an hour walk. I figured out where I need to go and what I need to do. But I've also figured out that I could just lock myself in my closet and no one will know where I am. So, you know, we have when things first started, we were like, it's movie night every night. And then after a few, after I think it was like a week and a half, my husband and I looked at each other and said, what have we done? We can't do movies every night. We're tired, right? So I think initially we were kind of like, oh, this is pretty good. And we were pretty excited about not having to take the kids, you know, we have kids in wrestling and soccer and the whole nine. So we were pretty excited about not having to be chauffeurs for everybody. And we did do what you said. We kind of started filling things up, right? Because we're no longer commuting. We're no longer doing all these things. We have learned really quickly that no is a complete sentence. And I'm okay with saying no. And I have dates in my calendar that have absolutely nothing in them. So when people have asked me, you know, are you available on this day? And I say no, like there's nothing on the calendar. And I think that's okay. And I think that we really need to do that. So, like I said, for me, my schedule is actually pretty busy. And I think if the average person were to see my schedule, it would be a little bit crazy or just odd or a little bit, you know, it's a little bit busy. But I also come from a family, like our family is a busy family. We have 4 kids. They're in activities. Like our normal everyday is a busy household. We have developed strategies to kind of deal with that. And so we're used to busy, but at the same time, we have now learned, this has kind of taught us it's okay to slow things down and it's okay to like book nothing. And it's okay to just take those moments for yourself. As long as you're also kind of getting things done. That's just me. Like, you know, I personally can't not like I can't let things kind of fall by the wayside because that actually increases my stress levels. I can't, right? So I can't, you know, have deadlines pass and that's okay because that makes me stress out. So as long as I have kind of planned things out, so part of my self-care is I have a planner. I go through my planner. I plan things out. I figure out how many days it's going to take for me to do things, right? And you know, I kind of plan things, but I also plan in those days where I don't do much, so that I can just restore myself. And one of the things that I remember hearing many, many years ago is that you can't pour from an empty cup. And that's just generally like you can't pour into your spouse, you can't pour into your children, you can't pour into your friendships, you can't pour into your job if you're empty. So you've got to pour into yourself. And so as a mom, I had to learn that. And I didn't learn that quickly. So it took a while, but I learned that. And that's something that I really hold dear. So that was a very long winded way to answer your question.
Oh, but that's excellent advice there. And again, I think the important thing is everyone is different. So it's funny because you mentioned the walk. We tried to go for a walk today, literally at, you know, the weather's always wrong on our iPhone weather. And as soon as we stepped out, it started raining a little bit. So
Yeah,
the plans went to waste there this afternoon. But again, I think the importance there is find your own sort of thing that brings you that peace there, whether it's going for a walk, whether it's doing a hobby for an hour, or I think, I mean, the best thing there is having a day or at least a part of a day there that you block off and say no, right? I mean, it's very hard. I think, especially in the legal profession, that there's always somebody who wants a yes to something, whether it's
that's right.
a meeting, whether it's a student, whether it's family, friends.
Mhm.
And you know, you have to find that time for yourself to do something for yourself so you can have that cup fill back up and
That's right.
recharge, and then be able to give all that back to
That's
whoever.
right. Yeah. Even when you and I were going to meet, I had said to you, let's book it for the beginning of the month because it just becomes a snowball, right? I said, I want to be able to do this. I'd love to be able to come and speak with you and your students. And let's do this at the beginning of the month because I know what it's going to look like later on in the month. And lo and behold, if you saw my schedule for the remainder of the month, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm glad I got in there right when I knew it. I'm sure your schedule was going to get busier and busier there. One of the other things we've been talking about here quite a bit is, and I think you have a very unique perspective since you get the honor there of welcoming so many people as citizens to Canada, is equity, diversity, and inclusion, especially in the legal profession. That I mean, I think there's been a lot of progress over the last decade, but I mean, as far as we've come, there's certainly more that we can go and achieve. And I think again, you have that unique perspective because you get to welcome all of these people to Canada, and they have all their hopes and dreams of what they've already accomplished as residents and what they're hoping to accomplish as citizens. And I think you know a lot of them come into thinking about the legal profession, right? And certainly people maybe in your class in 2010. Now who knows exactly where a lot of them have ended up, but no, I look around in a lot of my class and I see great diversity, and whether it's in race, whether it's in age, a lot of people coming to second careers. And I was wondering
Yes.
what maybe your thoughts of from your position, as well as obviously teaching, about the importance of developing more equity, diversity, and inclusion in the legal profession, and what more we can do to help achieve greater success in these endeavors.
Oh, what a loaded question. So EDI is so important. I have been the only person of color at so many tables, and it's challenging, but it's necessary not to be the only one, but to be a voice, because I have been in situations where decisions were about to be made that were going to have adverse effect, damaging effect, or without thought. Like, who did you not think about this or that? So the fact that there are so many voices missing is really problematic. And voices, I mean, voices in so many various capacities, whether it's older voices, whether it's differently abled voices, whether it's voices from various racialized communities, whether it's immigrant voices, whether, like there are so many decisions being made right now as we speak that that are lacking in depth of thought, because there's no consideration for who's not at the table, and there's no consideration for who needs to be consulted or brought to the table, for us to be able to make a really meaningful determination about what to do. Now, the other reason why it's really important is because there are so many areas, especially if we start broadening our perspectives of the areas of law that we would like to be able to kind of permeate. There are so many areas of law where we require different voices, and we require different types of representation. And also too, when you, I'll give you an example. In statutory accident benefits, if you look at I want to say it's the Form 1. Now I'm going by memory here, but if you look on the Form 1, I think it's the Form 1 where you're talking about like attendant care benefits, okay? And they're talking about, these are the types of things that people require help with, right? And one of the things is they talk about hair care, and they talk about help with combing and brushing hair. So I'm going to bring my hair a little closer to the screen here, but I have locks. I don't know if you guys can see my hair. I don't comb or brush my hair. And my hair requires a different type of care. And it's not daily brushing. I also don't daily wash my hair. So that's just one example, for instance, of a form and a mindset in terms of one small microcosm of in an area of law that is lacking in perspective. And we could be here for days talking about all the various things that have very similar things that we could be talking about, where we need different voices, we need different perspectives, we need to be able to demonstrate that we need to be able to look at things differently. Recently, we were looking at, I was at a meeting, we were talking about an appointments process, and we were talking about the concept of merit. And we were talking about the concept of merit, and the concept of merit was really coming from a very, a white male academic concept of merit. And so this application process, for instance, was really just based on a certain trajectory and a certain life path. And if you didn't meet that certain trajectory or certain life path, then the implication is almost that you don't have merit, when in fact so many people have merit and can demonstrate merit, but just haven't followed that life path. And so the reason why we need more representation within the profession of varying degrees is for those reasons and so many more reasons. When I do workshops on EDI, when I do workshops on representation and why we need to diversify boards and why we need to diversify I do them for libraries, for instance, why we need to be diversifying our collections. And I'm talking about libraries are the very first stop in so many communities of how people learn about each other and how we can foster a sense of inclusion and belonging. And when I talk about the fact that we need to diversify our boards, it's because they've already done all the studies to say that diverse boards make better decisions. And diverse is not just gender. Diverse is a hue, right? A hue. Diverse is, people who look, sound, walk differently, don't walk, right? Like it's everything. We need diverse voices to be able to make better decisions, to be able to know that we are truly creating transformational communities that are really dynamic and doing amazing things. And we are actually accepting mediocrity by not doing this. Like there's a quote, that I love by Maya Angelou. And it says, I'm going to actually pull it up because I always do a disservice but it basically says, if we're always trying to be normal, we don't know how amazing we can be. That's essentially what the quote says. But you can look it up. If you put in Maya Angelou, normal, amazing, it'll come up. It's something like, if we're always trying to be normal, we don't know how amazing we can be. And that's really what I'm saying, that our sense of normal is really allowing us to accept complacency and accept a world that could be way more dynamic. And I see it in citizenship ceremonies every single day when I meet individuals. And I don't want people to think that when I'm sitting in ceremonies that people are coming from only certain countries. Like, people are literally coming from all over the world. Literally all over the world. And it's amazing. Just that energy that's in that room is what we can be harnessing in our communities each and every day. So that's a soapbox I could be on like forever. So
well, that's excellent there. I think certainly with all different aspects of disadvantaged groups that we've highlighted there, the more diversity leads to more unique thoughts in the room. And it's sometimes, and I think you'd been one of the, I think, or the first African American professor there in the paralegal program, I believe.
Yeah.
And I think,
Yeah.
a lot of us, people of color, the same kind of experiences, a few years ago that you look around the table and you don't see similar people, right? And you kind of stick out, and then you want to make sure that the people coming forward have exemplary role models like yourself to say, look at Rochelle there. She's one of the 10 citizenship judges. She's my professor. She just won the 2021 Lincoln Alexander Award. That's something that I can emulate, right? And I think
Yeah.
the more that you see that out there, that it provides inspiration, and certainly you've provided a lot of inspiration and motivation for your students and anyone that you come into contact with. And it's great that that the profession can see that, and now it's about making sure that that continues going forward.
And that's the point. One thing that's really strikes me when I am presiding over a ceremony, it's not just other Black women that are like, oh my goodness, right? Like I remember being in a ceremony, and this man from, I think he was from Lebanon, and he was like, I want my wife to be just like you, right? Like it's not just um, you know, it's that, I've had women come up to me and say, especially because I'm very candid that I'm a mom, I didn't think that as a mom that I could be sitting in your shoes. But now that you've told me that you're a mom and you're doing what you do, I know that I can do that. And I've had my students who are mothers say, you know what, like, I kind of didn't realize that I could do so much more with my paralegal diploma beyond kind of what I thought. Here's where my mind was. But like, you're a mom and you're doing this. Like, that's amazing. I had a student who wasn't even my student. In Mohawk, there's a room that we teach in. It's the mock hearing room. And so it's got like a courtroom in there. But it's all glass, like there's two walls that are glass. And so there's like police foundation students, there's all sorts of students that walk by. And one day after class, a student who I've never seen before in my entire life came up to me and she was crying. And she was African Canadian. And she said, I don't know who you are. And she said, but I have watched you this entire semester stand up there and teach. And it just means so much to me because in my program, I don't have anyone that looks like you standing in my program, standing up and teaching. And I feel so alone. And I had to hug this young girl and like have her cry on my shoulders. Representation truly matters, not just to the students in my program. It matters to students in the school. It matters beyond the classroom. It matters in so many ways. I had a little girl in a ceremony come up to me. I sometimes wrap my head during a ceremony, and she came up to me. Her parents were getting their citizenship, and she was about 10 years old, 10 or 11. And, she was really shy and she wouldn't look me in the eye. And, I kind of put my arm around her. This is when we could touch each other because it was before COVID. And I said, you're so beautiful. Look me in the eye. I want to see your eyes. I'm sure your eyes are beautiful too. And she looked me in the eyes and she said, I can't look at you. And I said, why? And she said, because you're my hero. And, it was just so powerful to hear her say that. And I just saw a comment. Hold on. I saw your comment. Who's that? Bryce. Not having any positive gay role models until the late 2010s was also a little bit of a change too. Absolutely. Glad we have someone else to look to other than RuPaul. Yes, absolutely. Representation matters completely. We have to be mindful of what that means, especially when people don't see themselves. They need to be able to see themselves. And, there's what you, what is it? You can't be what you can't see, right? So it's really, really important that we think about that we think about how important representation is and what that means to people. Yeah.
Perfect. So thank you so much, Rochelle, for taking the time here and joining us this evening. And certainly it's been such a amazing journey to kind of go with you from 2010. I mean, even obviously before that as well, but from your time here finishing at Trust now over 10 years ago. It's probably like yesterday when you're thinking about it, but
It
in
did
that
feel
time
like
you've done so much for the profession there, from the immigration consulting side, and paralegal, mediation, um, teaching, and then now being a citizenship judge. And I missed probably a few things in there as well. And of course, being a mom to four. I mean, we struggle with our 3-year-old. I couldn't imagine having 4 kids, but I better knock here because one day maybe 4 of them. Um, any final words of wisdom here for all the students that are listening and anyone else listening about looking back, maybe where you were in their shoes 10 years ago, um, and dreaming of where you are today? I mean, I think a lot of people are looking like that 10-year-old girl and saying, no, you are my hero, because I'm at Trios College, and now I see someone who was in my shoes, and again, any paralegal college, or anyone anywhere else listening, and you're the epitome of someone that I would dream to be. And what can I do to take those steps and get into the profession and
Mhm.
thrive and succeed in the profession? Anything that you can say looking back on your time of what advice you can have for my students?
Well, I appreciate, first of all, you saying that. That's very sweet of you. The one thing that, well, there's probably a few things that'll probably roll off, like I kind of go off but one thing I will say is that when I was and you're very welcome, I'm seeing all the comments. Thank you so, so much, everyone. You're all so sweet. When I was at Trios, I wouldn't have told you years ago that I'd be standing right here. I could tell you that. My main focus then was about, I want to be able to help my husband to, help put food on the table. Like, it was really just that simple. I wanted to be able to, hone my skill. I knew that I had skill sets. I wanted to be able to continue to hone my skill. I wanted to be able to, you know, um, make myself proud, but also, my parents came here as immigrants. Both my parents come from Jamaica, and I didn't want for their journey to be for naught either, right? That was really important to me. I'm sure anyone who's kids of immigrants can identify with that. So that's always been something that's on the back of my mind. And so, but for me, it was just about just continue and trust the journey. You know, the reality is that um, I just trusted that God was going to place me where I needed to be. And that if I continued to do the things that I felt I was led to do, and sometimes it was by circumstance, like opening my practice was not what that was not what I planned, because I think I wanted to work for someone. I wanted to be able to gain certain skills before I kind of jumped out there. But I just trusted the journey and I trusted the process. I aligned myself with individuals who I hoped could provide some guidance and support as I went along the way. Um, I sought opportunities to volunteer. You wanted me to talk about volunteering, JP. I volunteered not only, as a public appointee, but I volunteered with community organizations. I think that that is fundamentally important. Governance training and all of those things are fundamentally important to me, but also help you to hone a skill set. But also helps you, when you volunteer and you're smart about the way you volunteer. So it really should be intrinsic. It shouldn't be that you're just trying to be strategic. It should be organizations that align with your own interests and what have you. But when you volunteer in organizations that align with your interests, but also help you, to kind of hone your skills, that's a nice symbiotic reciprocal relationship. And so your resume starts to look a lot better. And, as you kind of gain in your confidence, you gain in your skill, it allows you to continue to kind of move on to that next level. And so, I trusted the journey, and I just continued to try to grow. So with each opportunity, I tried to grow. And so if you have an interest in, I saw a comment, human rights, well, find an organization to volunteer your time so you can hone that skill. Find a way to, maybe there's a community legal clinic, or there's some organizations that, that do that type of work, so that you can get that type of experience and see where that leads you, see where see where you're led, see where that helps you. And just kind of take it from there, because I avoided immigration for a very long time, simply because I thought this isn't for me. And as I kept doing, as I finally jumped into immigration, things just really started to snowball in a positive way for me. So, I would just say to trust your journey, and trust that you are being led where you're meant to be. When you see doors opening, don't fight it, because that's probably where you're supposed to be. And when doors close, that's an opportunity where maybe that's not for you. Don't fight that either. And continue to just trust that instinct and where you're being led to be. And trust that where you land is where you're supposed to kind of now develop that skill and continue to grow and learn. Because that's what I did. And, I feel really blessed to be where I am now. So I think that's all that I can really offer in terms of when I kind of look on my own journey. I'm really thankful. I feel really blessed, and I'm grateful. Truly, I am.
Thanks so much once again. And I did get the quote here. Make sure I read it correctly. If you're always trying to be normal, you will never know how amazing you can be.
There we
So
go.
don't be normal there, and strive to hit your amazing there. Would be missed there. Last thing here, congratulations again on the 2021 Lincoln Alexander Award. Maybe you can share a last few words here about winning that award and what that means to you.
Oh, absolutely. So I will say that a friend of mine had contacted me and said, I'd like to nominate you for the Distinguished Paralegal Award. I think that you deserve it. I think that you've done an amazing job. And I was like, oh, thank you. And so, she kind of got all of that together. It was a colleague of mine. And so I knew that had went in. And I had just done this amazing ceremony for Black History Month with the minister and Jean Augustine, celebrating the 25th anniversary of Black History Month. And it was so fantastic. And then I saw the Law Society called, and I was like, that's not good. And it was Teresa Donnelly herself. And I went, I haven't done anything. I think I've only done good things. And then it was Teresa Donnelly, and she had called to let me know that she had put forward a motion after getting my resume to expand the definition or the requirements for the Lincoln Alexander Award to include paralegals, because upon receiving my application, she felt that it was deserving of the Lincoln Alexander Award. And so she put forward the motion to convocation. She got the endorsement of Lincoln Alexander's family, which is really meaningful to me, especially being the judge for Hamilton. I'm connected with Erica Alexander, his granddaughter, and the treasurer told me that she spoke with Marnie Beale, which is his Lincoln Alexander's widow, and they, she gave her endorsement, and so the motion went to convocation, and they apparently unanimously decided that paralegals could now receive the Lincoln Alexander Award. And the day before, I saw that had went through, but I didn't think it had anything to do with me. I just thought, oh, that's really great. Maybe next year, like you just kind of, and so then she told me it was because she saw my resume, my CV, and had wanted to put it forward. I literally cried, and I cried because and it was not a good cry. It was one of those ugly cries. And it was an ugly cry at the wrong time, because I had media right after this ceremony, and I was supposed to do media interviews online. So, I had to quickly kind of figure that out. But I ugly cried because it was an affirmation. Again, as I said, you know, you trust your journey. You're not doing any of this for the accolades. You're doing this because, like, it's really important for me to help to elevate the profession. I want to do my part to elevate the profession. I want to do my part because I know that paralegals are more than capable. I know that paralegals have and continue to do great things. They haven't recognized all the firsts. You know, I was the first paralegal to sit on the council of the College of Midwives, but you know, like that's not something you don't like. That's just what you do. We're just doing the work, you know, and so it was just a beautiful affirmation of all of your experiences, of the work that you've done, of some of the challenges you've been through, of the things you want to do. And it was just a really meaningful, still is a very meaningful um, award, especially being named after Lincoln Alexander, who has done so much for Canadians in general, but has done so many firsts. He's, you know, the first Black MP in Canada, the first Black Lieutenant Governor in Ontario. I had the privilege of meeting him once he was going into the federal court when I was leaving the federal court. And, you know, his legacy is just so powerful and so beautiful. And so to win an award in his name just really touches my heart. And yeah, it means so much. And again, you know, not my head is always kind of, I'm always kind of just doing the work. And so to be able to get this recognition is just a really beautiful thing for me.
And thanks so much once again for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time there from your schedule to speak to my students and to anyone else listening. Really appreciate it, and wish you all the best with everything that you're doing. And once again, congratulations. And for everyone tuning in, take care and have a nice rest of the evening, and see you hopefully tomorrow.
You too. Take care, John Paul. Thanks for having me. Bye, everyone.